The strangest thing in that motel room wasn't the old man on the bed. It was the photograph on the wall. I'd only seen that face once before. On a night I'd been trying not to think about for years. I'm Cap Sam, retired from Station 47. I've walked into more rooms than I can count, but I'll never forget the night we answered a quiet little call to the Old Highway Motel and found a piece of our own past hanging in a cheap wooden frame. That Old Highway Motel sits just off Route 19, on the edge of town. If you're just passing through, you barely notice it. A faded sign, a broken neon vacancy that flickers when the air gets damp. A row of low rooms, all doors and curtains and old paint. These days, most folks take the newer bypass, the big 4-lane with the gas station and the fast food joints. The Old Highway Motel just sits there, like a forgotten book on a shelf nobody dusts anymore. Every now and then I still drive that way out of habit. Old roots get into your bones. And every time I pass that motel, even now, I slow down just a little bit. And I think about room 12. It was late autumn, the night this story really began. The kind of night when the air's got a bite to it, but winter hasn't quite moved in yet. Leaves were stuck to the wet asphalt. The streets had that damp, empty sound they get after midnight. Back then, I wasn't retired. I was still Cap Sam of Station 47. More gray in my hair than I liked. More years on the job than I ever expected to see. The station was quiet that night. Quiet in the way you only get in a small town, after everyone's locked up their shops and turned off their porch lights. Inside it smelled like it always did. Old coffee, wet gear, and that faint hint of diesel that never really leaves a firehouse, no matter how much you scrub. Parker was stretched out on the couch in front of the TV, one arm thrown over his eyes, pretending he wasn't already asleep. Jones sat at the table with a crossword. He was filling in more of the margins than the squares. I was at the watch desk, like I usually was on the late shift. You sit in that chair long enough and you start to feel like, if you get up, the whole town might miss something. The board was dark, no lights, no tones. Just the soft hum of the vending machine in the corner and the tick of the old wall clock, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, I could hear a truck downshifting somewhere out on the highway. The sound rolled in and faded like a wave. We'd had a couple of calls earlier in the evening. Nothing too dramatic. A smoke detector set off by someone burning dinner. A small brush pile that got away from a backyard fire pit. The kind of calls that leave you a little tired but grateful. Nothing on the news. Nobody's life turned completely upside down. Just little reminders that people still need you. I poured myself another cup of coffee, even though it had already been on the burner too long. In a firehouse, good coffee is more rumor than reality. 10 down, 4 letters, Jones muttered, squinting at his puzzle. Says peaceful. Sleep, I said. Very funny, you asked. I shrugged. Parker snored softly. The TV spilled blue light over his boots. It felt like one of those nights that was going to slide by without a fuss. And I'll tell you something I've learned. There's danger in that feeling. When you start to believe nothing's going to happen, that's usually when something does. The radio crackled just a little at first, Not the sharp blare of a full alert, more like an electronic throat clearing. Then dispatch came through. The operator that night was a woman named Carla. You could always tell when it was her. She sounded tired, but never bored. Station 47, respond for possible medical. Old Highway Motel, room 12. Caller reports, elderly male, difficulty breathing, no response at the door. Nearest unit, please acknowledge. That was it. No screaming in the background. No get here now in the tone. Just words on a line. Read off a screen. Parker's arm slid off his eyes and he blinked at me. Jones set his pen down. I clicked the mic. Station 47 copies. Old Highway Motel, room 12. Possible medical. Difficulty breathing, no response at door. Do we have any additional info? There was a small pause. You get used to those pauses. It's the sound of someone scrolling through your future. Caller, his neighbor in room 11, Carla said. Reports hearing persistent coughing, then loud banging on the shared wall, then nothing. No answer when he knocked. Front desk confirms elderly male registered in room 12, alone. No known history on file. EMS is en route. ETA 10. Copy, I replied. 47 will respond. We'll advise on scene. I looked over at Parker. On your feet, I said. We're taking the utility truck. Medical bag, O2, monitor, and let's not forget the good flashlight for once. So, just us? He asked, already standing. For now, I said. If it turns into more, we'll call the cavalry. Right now sounds like a welfare check with a little extra. Jones raised an eyebrow. Motel calls, he said. Always fun. Somebody's got to go, I answered. He nodded and gave us that half salute he used when he wanted to say be careful without sounding sentimental. The night hit us as soon as we pushed through the bay door. Cool, damp, a little fog starting to gather near the river. The utility truck's headlights cut a narrow path through it. The beams caught bits of mist and the odd drifting leaf. I slid behind the wheel. Parker tossed the medical bag in the back and climbed in on the passenger side. Old Highway Motel, he said, buckling up. That place still in business? Barely, I said. Been there since before we had air packs that fit right. Changed hands a few times. Used to be truckers, then salesmen. Now it's mostly people who don't want to put their real address on a form. Sounds charming, he muttered. Hey, I said. I've slept in worse places. At least their ice machine used to work. He snorted. The wipers thumped across the windshield now and then, clearing away the light drizzle that couldn't quite make up its mind to be real rain. I know some folks picture sirens and speed every time we head to a call. Truth is, a lot of rides are quiet. You sit there with the engine humming and the radio low, thinking about what you're about to walk into. Elderly male, trouble breathing, Parker said, repeating the words like they tasted funny. Yeah, I said. He glanced at me. You think it's one of those haven't seen him in a few days situations? He asked. Could be, I said. Could be he fell asleep with the TV too loud. Could be something in his lungs finally deciding it's had enough. Could be we're back at the station in 20 minutes, Parker said, trying for light. Could be, I agreed. But some of the calls that sounded like that kept me up longer than any 3-alarm ever did. He didn't have an answer for that. We let the road do the talking for a while. The Old Highway Motel came into view the way it always did. Suddenly. 1 minute, it's dark fields and the occasional reflector on a fence post. The next, there's that tired, low building hugging the edge of the road. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. The O in motel didn't light anymore. The parking lot was half full. A couple of compact cars, one pickup that had seen better decades, a mid-sized sedan with an out-of-state plate. A thin strip of light showed under the office door, the kind of light that says someone is awake, but wishing they weren't. I pulled into the lot and killed the siren we hadn't turned on in the first place. No need to wake the whole place if it really was nothing. We grabbed the gear and headed toward the office first. You learn to talk to the front desk before you start knocking on random doors in a place like that. The bell over the office door gave a tired little ring as we stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Old coffee, paper, and that particular motel scent you don't find anywhere else. A mix of cleaning products, stale air, and every life that's passed through those rooms, boiled down into something you can't quite name. Behind the counter sat a woman in her late 50s, hair pulled back tight, glasses on a chain around her neck. She had the look of someone who had seen every kind of guest and run out of surprise 20 years ago. "You boys the fire department?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Station 47. You called in about room 12. "I didn't," she said. "Guy in 11 did, but I told dispatch he wasn't making it up." She slid a guest ledger toward herself and glanced at it, more for something to do than because she needed to. "Old guy," she went on. "Checked in 3 nights ago. Name's Miller, Raymond Miller. Paid cash, 1 night at a time." "Seemed sick when he checked in?" I asked. She thought about it. "He seemed tired," she said. "But then, so do most people who walk through that door after midnight. Didn't talk much. No trouble. Comes out in the morning for coffee. Goes back to his room. Last 2 mornings I didn't see him at all. Figured he was sleeping in." "That happen often?" Parker asked. "People disappearing?" "More often than I like," she said. "But this one. First morning, he made his bed like a soldier. Tight corners, folded towel. That tells you something." "Room key?" I asked. She hesitated, then pulled a metal key from the hook behind her. "You gonna break the door?" she asked. "Only if we have to," I said. "We'll try the easy way first." She nodded, but her jaw tightened. "You do what you gotta do," she said. "If he's in trouble, I don't want it on my conscience that I told you to be gentle on a door." There it was, that little flicker of care under all the tired. I'd seen it in a lot of people who worked the night shift. They acted like nothing surprised them, but they still hoped for the best when they called us. The hallway to room 12 was narrow, low ceiling, thin carpet that had given up fighting against the stains. The air felt heavier there, colder too, even though there was no real draft. We passed room 9, 10, 11. From behind one door came the muffled sound of a game show. From another, the soft, wet cough of someone smoking more than their lungs could politely tolerate. Outside room 11, A man in a t-shirt and sweatpants cracked his door and peered out. "You from the fire department?" he whispered. "Yes, sir," I said. "You the one who called?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah, I'm in 11, he said. I kept hearing him cough all night. At first I thought he was just hacking up a lung like everybody else, but then he started banging on the wall, hard, twice, 3 times. Then nothing. I went over. No answer. Scared me, to tell you the truth." "You did the right thing," I told him. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't want to make trouble," he said. "But my dad went like that. Quiet. I didn't want to be the guy who just turned up his TV and pretended not to hear. Sometimes the bravest thing a person does is admit they're worried. He'd done his part. "We'll take it from here," I said. "Stay in your room for now, okay?" He nodded and closed the door just enough to leave a sliver open. I could feel his eyes on us even after I couldn't see him anymore. We stopped in front of room 12. The door looked like every other door in that hallway. Off-white paint, cheap brass numbers screwed in crooked, a metal handle that had been turned by too many hands. Parker knocked. "Mr. Miller," he called. "Fire department. You okay in there?" Silence. He knocked again, harder. "Mr. Miller, can you answer the door?" Nothing. I put my ear near the door. Sometimes you can hear a TV, a fan, a voice. This time, there was only the faint hum of the building and my own breath. I looked at Parker. "Key," I said. He handed me the metal key the manager had given us. "Last chance," I called, loud enough for anyone inside or in the next county to hear. "Mr. Miller, we're coming in." No answer. The key slid into the lock with a little resistance. It turned with a soft click. I opened the door. The smell of that room is one I won't forget. Not the smell of death. People always think we mean that when we talk about unforgettable smells. This was different. It smelled like old cigarettes, yes, and like carpet that had seen too many shoes and not enough sunlight. But under that, there was something else. Medicine, maybe. A sharp tang of alcohol wipes and cheap cologne. And the sour note of someone who'd been breathing too hard in too small a space. The room was dim, lit only by the standing lamp in the corner and the flicker of a muted television. On the bed, propped up against a stack of pillows, was the old man. He was thin in the way people get when their body's been fighting something for a long time. Hollow cheeks, skin a little gray around the edges. His chest rose and fell in uneven, shallow pulls. Every few breaths, it hitched, like the machinery inside him was skipping a gear. "Mr. Miller?" I said, stepping in. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy, but still trying to focus. "Who?" he managed. "My name's Cap Sam, Station 47, I said. "This is Parker. Your neighbor got worried about you. Said he heard you banging on the wall." He tried to wave a hand, as if to push the idea away, but his arm only lifted a few inches before trembling. "Didn't mean to scare anybody," he wheezed. "Being scared is better than being quiet," I said. "Quiet is how folks get into trouble." Parker moved to the far side of the bed, already opening the medical bag. "Sir, I'm just going to put this on your finger," he said, sliding the pulse oximeter into place. And this cuff on your arm, just helping us see how your body's doing, okay?" Mr. Miller didn't argue. He looked too tired, too. While Parker worked the numbers, I let my eyes drift around the room. The bed was made under him with tight, sharp corners. Even the blanket pull was straight. He'd done that himself, I'd bet. On the little table by the bed were 3 prescription bottles with worn labels, an inhaler, a half-finished glass of water. His suitcase sat open on the luggage rack, clothes folded with a care that didn't match the shabby room. And on the wall, just above the small desk, was the photograph. Plain wooden frame, cheap. The kind you buy when you're not thinking about style, just about getting a picture off the dresser and onto the wall. The photo inside was old. The colors had bled over time, fading toward yellow at the edges. It was a shot of a street corner at night, a building behind it, smoke still curling out of its broken windows. In the foreground, a fire engine I knew too well. Station 47's old rig. Half a dozen firefighters caught mid-movement, helmets on, turnout coats flaring. And there, near the center but slightly turned, was a younger man in gear I recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. Me. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Of all the motel rooms in all the out-of-the-way towns, we had walked into one with a picture of my crew on the wall. "Cap," Parker said. "You with me?" "Yeah," I said, blinking. "What do you got?" "Pressure's low," he said. "O2 sat isn't great. Respiration's fast but shallow. Feels like congestive heart failure on top of COPD. We need that ambulance to hurry." I thumbed my radio. "Station 47 to dispatch," I said. "We're with the patient at Old Highway Motel, room 12. Male, late 70s, respiratory distress, low blood pressure. What's EMS CTA?" "EMS reports 5 minutes out," Carla answered. "Do you need additional units?" "Negative at this time," I said. "We'll advise if that changes." I clipped the radio back and turned to Mr. Miller. "How long you been feeling like this?" I asked. He tried a shrug. "A while," he said. "Got worse tonight." "Any chest pain?" I asked. "Few days ago," he said. "You tell anyone?" I asked. He shook his head. "Doctors had their turn," he murmured. "They had plenty of turns. I was just waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked, before I could stop myself. He looked at the photograph on the wall, and something in my chest tightened. There was a case, years before that night, that I'd carried around like a stone in my pocket. We'd called it the Corner House Fire. It started in the back of a narrow 2-story home just off Main Street. After midnight, winter night, cold enough to make your teeth hurt. We got there late, not because we didn't care, because life got in the way. There'd been a wreck on the interstate, bad roads, a second engine tied up on a medical call that went sideways. By the time we pulled up, the whole back half of the house was going. We hit it hard, like we always did. We got people out. We did our jobs. But we were too late for one person. A young man in his early 20s. His father stood in the street, coat over pajamas, bare feet on icy sidewalk, watching his whole world tilt. I remember his face more than his words. The way his jaw shook when he tried not to scream. The way his eyes jumped between the house and our engine, like he couldn't decide which one to blame. We wrote our reports. Investigators did theirs. The official stories said what a lot of official stories say. We did what we could with what we had when we got there. But official stories don't always quiet the ones in your head. For years after, I would drive past that corner and think about all the minutes between the 911 call and our arrival, like beads on a string, where we were when the tones dropped, what road I chose, which decision cost us 30 extra seconds, and which gave us 15 back. It wasn't healthy, but it's what we do sometimes. Now here I was, in a motel room, staring at a photo of that very scene, taken from across the street, before we'd even knocked down the worst of it. And next to the frame, on the wall, was a small hole from a thumbtack, like someone had hung it, taken it down, then decided to put it back up again. "You were there," the old man said. His voice was weak but clear. I turned back to him. "Yes, sir," I said slowly. "I was. Took me a bit to be sure," he said. "Couldn't see your face in the photo clear, but I recognized the way you stood, shoulder a little low on one side, like you'd been carrying weight longer than you were meant to." Parker shot me a quick look. "You know him, Cap?" he asked. I didn't have a simple answer for that. "I was on the engine that night," I said. "Corner house fire, kid in his 20s. I looked at the old man. "Was he your son?" He closed his eyes briefly, like just hearing the question cost him. "Yes," he whispered. The air in that little room got heavier, not because of the lack of oxygen. That was already obvious in the way his chest fought for every breath. Heavier because the past had just climbed out of a photograph and sat down with us on the edge of the bed. "I remember that night," I said quietly. "I do too," he replied. Outside in the hallway, a door closed softly. Somewhere, a toilet flushed. Life went on, one thin wall away from all of this. "I've been trying not to think about it for years," I admitted. "Me too," he said. Parker adjusted the nasal cannula we'd put on him. The clear tubes fed oxygen into his nose. "I'm gonna bump this up a bit, okay?" Parker said. "Make it a little easier to breathe." Mr. Miller nodded, eyes still on me. "You angry?" he asked. The question surprised me. "Angry?" I repeated. "About what?" "That they sent you here," he said. "Of all the people, of all the nights." He had a point. "If I'm honest," I said, "I'm more humbled than anything. Life's got a way of circling back on you. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes it's not." He let out a breath that might have been a laugh if he'd had the lung capacity. "Gentle isn't the word I'd use," he murmured. "Fair enough," I said. I pulled the chair from the little desk over by the bed and sat down where he could see me without turning his head too much. "I'm not here to argue with your memories," I said, "or mine. But as long as we're both breathing in the same room, we might as well talk plain." He studied me with those tired eyes, watery but sharp behind the haze. "Plain is all I've got left," he said. Tell me, I said, why this motel? He blinked slowly. Didn't want to die in my house, he said. The sentence was so blunt, it took me a second to answer. That's a specific choice, I said. He shrugged with one bony shoulder. House has enough ghosts in it, he said. Didn't want to add another. And my daughter. She'd spend the rest of her life walking past the bedroom door, wondering if she could have done more. This way, she gets a phone call. She cries. She settles my accounts. She goes on. He paused to catch his breath. The motel's just a place on the road, he said. Come, go, forget. Easier that way. Easier for who? I asked softly. For her, he said. For everybody. He looked at the photograph again. For me? He added. Nothing's been easy since that night anyway, so that part doesn't much matter. You've been carrying that a while, I said. He gave another almost laugh. I've been carrying that most of my life, he said. The fire just gave it a face. Parker checked his watch. Cap, he said quietly. Ambulance should be hitting the lot any minute. Good, I said. Then to Mr. Miller, you're not done yet. Not on my watch. He closed his eyes. Maybe not tonight, he said, but soon enough. He opened them again and locked onto mine. You ever think about doing something different that night? He asked. Every way you could imagine, I said. I've pulled that map out in my head 1,000 times, tried it with different starting points, different routes, different decisions. He waited. And? He asked. And most of the time, I said, if I'm being honest and not just punishing myself, we still get there too late. He looked at me a long moment, like he was weighing that against some private ledger. I spent years blaming you, he said. You, the crew, the city, God, the snowplows, the man who left a space heater too close to a pile of clothes. Anybody whose name I could put between me and what actually happened. That's a long list, I said. Grief needs fuel, he replied. It burns whatever you feed it. I nodded. I had my own list, I said. Mostly my own name on it. Sometimes the roads, sometimes the weather. Never your boy. He looked surprised. Never? He rasped. He didn't set that fire, I said. He didn't stop us at the city limits. He didn't make me choose which engine went where. He was just on the other end of a lot of bad minutes. Mr. Miller's eyes went shiny. You remember him? He asked. I remember his shoes by the door, I said. One tipped over. I remember the family pictures on the living room wall. I remember your face in the street. He swallowed hard. You told me, he said slowly, that you did everything you could. I did, I said, and I still wish I could have done more. He let that hang there for a while. The only sound in the room was his breathing and the soft tick of the cheap clock on the nightstand. Funny thing, he said at last. I've spent so long arguing with that sentence in my head, I never let it breathe on its own. You don't have to decide tonight, I said, about forgiving us, or yourself, or anybody. He snorted softly. Who said anything about forgiving? He asked. Let's just start with not fighting it so hard. Parker moved over to the wall heater. An old baseboard unit hummed near the foot of the bed. "Cap," he said quietly, "you seeing this?" I walked around. The heater was running hot. Too hot. The paint on the wall above it had browned a little. The extension cord plugged into the outlet next to it was discolored near the plug. Plastic starting to warp. The cord ran up to the nightstand. It fed a lamp, a phone charger, and an ancient clock radio stacked on a cheap plastic cube. I put my hand near the cord without touching it. "Feel that?" I asked. Parker nodded. "Another hour of this, maybe 2, he said. "You've got yourself a melted plug, maybe a spark. Old curtains, old bedspread. Old lungs that don't need any more smoke." I finished. Mr. Miller watched us, eyes half-lidded. "That thing's been making a funny sound all night," he said. "Didn't think much of it." "Most people don't," I said. "That's why they call us." I walked back into the little entryway and found the switch that fed that outlet. I flipped it off. The heater stuttered, then died. The air in the room cooled just a hair, but it felt better, not worse. I pulled the cord from the wall. "Gonna have a talk with the manager after this," I muttered. Parker shook his head. "Just a medical call, huh?" he said. "Some of the scariest fires I've ever seen started in rooms just like this," I said. "Too many plugs, not enough sockets. Too much quiet, not enough attention." I turned back to Mr. Miller. "Congratulations," I said. "You almost got your wish to die somewhere nobody knew your name." He managed a weak smile. "Almost," he said. "Guess you ruined that for me tonight." "Glad to be a nuisance," I replied. We heard the faint wail of the ambulance siren before we saw the lights. It didn't sound like the end of the world, just a reminder that someone else out there was still doing their job, too. Parker went to the door. "I'll go guide them in," he said. "Tell them low and slow through the hallway," I said. "We don't need a stretcher through the drywall." He slipped out. I stayed by the bed. Up close, Mr. Miller's skin had that waxy tone that says, the body is tired of arguing with gravity. "You married?" I asked. "Was," he said. "She's gone now. 8 years." "Kids?" I asked. "Just the one," he said. "My boy. After the fire, it was just me and the ghosts." "You never remarried?" I asked. He gave me a look like I'd suggested he try out for ballet. "When you bury your only child," he said, "it changes the shape of the world. Didn't seem right to ask somebody else to live in that shape with me." I nodded slowly. "You said you didn't want your daughter haunted by your room," I said, "but you never gave yourself the same kindness." He considered that. "Maybe I didn't think I deserved it," he said. The hallway grew brighter as the paramedics approached. Their rolling cart hummed softly on its wheels. "Let me ask you something," I said quickly, before the room filled up with more people and more noise. He lifted his eyebrows a fraction. "Do you think I did what I could that night?" I asked. It was a selfish question, maybe. But the years don't make all the questions smaller. He drew in a breath and let it out, slow. "I think," he said, "you did what you could with what you knew and where you were. I think God, or fate, or bad plumbing, or whatever you want to call it, did the rest. And I think I've been trying to control parts of that story that were never mine." He closed his eyes briefly. "And I think," he added, opening them again, "that if you wanted an easier life, you picked the wrong line of work, son." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for a long time. "Fair enough," I said. The paramedics came in with that efficient kindness that always made me proud to work alongside them. 2 of them, both younger than I was when that house burned, but not by much. One went straight to the patient, the other to Parker, to get the rundown. 70-something male, known cardiac and pulmonary history, decompensated, Parker said. Pressure's been sliding. O2 sat improved a little with nasal cannula, but not where we'd like it. Coherent, oriented enough to answer questions, complaining mostly of fatigue and shortness of breath. They nodded and moved with practiced motion. "Mr. Miller," one of them said, "we're going to take you to the hospital now, okay? They've got more toys than we do." He groaned softly. "Told you," he said to me. "Hospitals? They also have machines that go beep in helpful ways," I said. "Humor us." They got him onto the cot gently, bundled him in thin blankets that never seemed quite big enough. As they started to roll him toward the door, he reached out a hand, fingers shaking. I took it. His grip was surprisingly strong. "If you see my boy again," he said, voice feathery, "tell him I'm sorry I spent so long yelling at the fire instead of just missing him." I swallowed. "If you see him before I do," I said, "tell him we talk about him sometimes down at the station. Not the fire, just him, and we wish we'd had more time." A tear slid out of the corner of his eye and into the wrinkles at his temple. "That's good," he whispered. Then they wheeled him out. Parker and I stayed behind to do the things no one thinks about. We gathered up the leftover supplies, took one last look at the heater and the cord. "I'm going to mention this loud enough that the manager has to pretend to care," I said. Before we left, I turned back to the photograph on the wall. There we were, frozen in time in that streetlight glow, surrounded by smoke and steam. Younger, faster, less gray. On the edge of the frame, half cut off, was a man in pajamas, coat thrown over them, bare feet on icy ground. Mr. Miller. He had been there, too, that night, in his own way. I reached up and straightened the frame. For a second, I thought about taking it down, telling myself some story about evidence or personal effects. But I left it there. Some stories don't need us to rearrange them after the fact. When we stepped back into the hallway, the neighbor in 11 cracked his door again. "Everything okay?" he whispered. "Well, it's better than it was half an hour ago," I said. "You helped with that." He looked startled. "Me?" he asked. "You heard something and you didn't roll over and go back to sleep," I said. "You made a phone call. That's more than a lot of people do. You may not get your name in the paper for it, but you put a few more minutes on that man's timeline. That counts." He swallowed. His eyes shone just a little. "My dad," he started, then stopped. "I wish somebody had done that for him. Once." Sometimes we get to be for someone else what we wish somebody had been for us. I said, "Tonight you got to be that." He nodded and closed the door, more gently this time. Parker and I walked back out into the cool night air. The ambulance was pulling away. Red lights bounced off the wet asphalt without the siren. The manager stood in the doorway of the office, arms crossed against the cold. "You taking him far?" she called. "County hospital," I said. "They'll take it from here." She huffed. "Hope he doesn't stiff me on the last night's bill," she muttered. I gave her a look. She held up a hand. "I'm kidding," she said. "Mostly." Then softer. "You think he makes it?" I looked at the taillights fading into the dark. "I think he's got a better chance tonight than he did an hour ago," I said. "And I think you did right, letting us in without making it complicated." She nodded. "I'll get someone to look at that heater," she said. "Good," I replied. "We prefer that only one kind of emergency happens in a room at a time." She actually smiled at that. "I'd love to tell you that Mr. Miller walked out of that hospital a new man, that he went home, made peace with the world, joined a support group, and lived another 10 years. Truth is, I don't know exactly how long he lasted after that night. We heard he made it through the first few days, that the doctors got his fluid levels under control, tuned up his medications, gave him a stern talking to. A couple of weeks later, an envelope showed up at the station. No return address beyond a city we recognized. Inside was a short note and a photo. The note was written in a shaky hand. "Cap Sam," it said. "I don't know if you remember me. I was the old man in room 12 at the Old Highway Motel. I'm still here for now. Not sure how long for now will last. But I wanted you to know something. I sleep a little better since that night. Not because my heart's any stronger, but because I stopped replaying the corner house fire as if I could change the ending. You and your boys didn't light that match. You didn't close that road. You showed up. That's all any of us can ask of anyone. If you're still carrying that night around, you can set it down now. Maybe just carry this one instead. Sincerely, Raymond Miller." The photo was of a grave. Simple stone. A young man's name. Fresh flowers. At the bottom of the note, in smaller letters, he'd added, "Next time you drive past, you can tell him I finally stopped shouting at the fire." I kept that note in my locker for a long time. When I cleaned it out for the last time before retirement, I held it in my hand for a while. Then I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet, behind a picture of my own kids. Some things you let go of. Some things you carry on purpose. These days, when I drive past the Old Highway Motel, it looks even more tired than it did back then. Half the rooms are boarded up now. The vacancy sign doesn't even pretend to light. Sometimes there's police tape sagging in the wind across one section or another. Reminders that not every story there is quiet or kind. But every so often I swear I still see one lamp burning behind a curtain near the middle of the row. Room 12. Maybe it's just memory playing tricks. Maybe they renumbered the rooms years ago and it doesn't even line up anymore. Doesn't really matter. What matters is this. People think our job is all about the big fires, the ones that eat skylines, the ones that make the front page. And those matter, sure. But some of the calls that stay with you the longest, are the quiet ones, the ones that don't wake the neighbors, the ones that come in as a calm voice on the radio, reading a line off a screen. Elderly male, trouble breathing, Old Highway Motel, room 12. If you'd asked me, that night, if that call would still be echoing in my life years later, I probably would have said no. But I was wrong. You don't always know which door is going to lead you back into a room you thought you'd sealed off in your mind. You don't always know which quiet little call is going to take a stone out of your pocket that's been weighing you down for years. That motel room didn't have any flames for us to fight. No collapsing roof, no dramatic rescues. Just an old man with a tired heart, a dangerous heater, and a photograph on the wall where two timelines crossed. His and ours. Sometimes that's enough to change the shape of the story. The strangest thing in that motel room wasn't the old man on the bed. It was the photograph on the wall. And the way, for the first time in a long time, we both walked out of a shared memory a little lighter than we'd walked in.